Guys, welcome back to the show. Our guest this evening is the National Communications Director of the 10th Amendment Center, as well as the host of the Godarchy podcast, making something like his 11th appearance on the show to talk with us about OSHA, mandates, and so much more. It's Mike Maharrey. Mike, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm hungry now with all the pie talk.
Well, okay. In our defense, in episodes past, we always do the tier list at the end of the show. Like, that's kind of like our finale before we send it off. But we had to fit it in at the beginning of the show because we just don't have enough time for all the dumb crap that the audience wanted to see this week. And so we shoved it into the JFK segment. I mean, naturally. So, there you are.
Anyway, yeah.
Mike, on December 4th of last year, December 4th, 2020, Joe Biden said in response to a question about vaccine mandates, quote, "No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand it to be mandatory." So we're going to start there. What changed?
I'm, I'm floored that a politician lied.
Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable. But to give people a little bit of background here, there's a difference, of course, between federal mandates and state mandates. And
Sure.
now there have been a variety of states that have handled the pandemic in looser or more strict ways.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't really had to worry about a federal mandate until quite recently.
This is true.
And then Biden rolls out this threat of a federal mandate. And then the question becomes, well, when is it going to take effect? And how is it going to be enforced? Now, the win is a little bit up for debate because it was supposed to be right after the first of the new year, but now
it was
it's
like
currently
November something.
yeah, but now it's currently in a stay
Right.
because there's a big court battle going on. But the how was going to be OSHA. So I'm going to turn it back over to you right there for that. Exactly. Just for people who have been living in an absolute bubble, or for lucky folks who have never been any type of contracting or construction, who have no idea who OSHA is. What is OSHA, and how exactly was OSHA going to be involved with a vaccine mandate?
So OSHA is your federal agency for workplace safety. It's like what? Occupational Safety and Health Administration, I think, is what OSHA stands for. It's yet another unconstitutional alphabet agency that shouldn't exist in the first place, but we live in a post-constitutional world, so it does. And basically what it does is it enforces workplace safety mandates that come down from the federal government. So, they have things like they regulate ladders and, toxic chemicals that may be in the workplace. They want to make sure that there's proper railings, all of these things that have to do with workplace safety. Now, somebody might be saying, well, Mike, how can you object to workplace safety? Well, I don't object to workplace safety. I object to the federal government doing it because there's no constitutional authority for such things. And it's really ridiculous to have a federal agency micromanaging something like workplace safety. Now, some people will say, well, Mike, people say, well, Mike, a lot. Well, Mike, there's the Commerce Clause. The federal government has the power to regulate interstate commerce. Well, that's true. But, as with so many things with the Constitution, the federal government, the courts have effectively changed the meaning of the word commerce from what it meant when the Constitution was written and ratified. Commerce was simply meant to regulate trade across state lines, not workplace safety and health and all of these things that the federal government does. So we have this agency, and I guess I'm sure that the legal scholars in the White House and in Washington D.C. They had to think long and hard. How are we going to justify doing this vaccine mandate? Well, people have to go to work, and they might get coronavirus, so therefore it's an issue of workplace safety. So logically, OSHA should regulate it, and so here we are.
Now, so OSHA theoretically is going to be the regulatory piece of enforcing this mandate.
Right.
But I was just reading in an article very recently that straight out of the horse's mouth, where they were saying, well, let's be honest with ourselves here. OSHA doesn't have, when I say OSHA doesn't have the manpower to police this action, I don't mean they need to hire even 50 or 100,000 new regulators. It's not possible. There's
Right.
so many millions of more workplaces and potential violations than there could possibly be federal inspectors, that it's just simply incomprehensible for them to do it. But whether it's this particular mandate or whether it's a variety of other federal actions, how would OSHA go about enforcing it?
Well, it wouldn't. And it's interesting. I've got the numbers. OSHA actually had a personnel problem even before they rolled out this vaccine mandate. So, um, OSHA has roughly 770 inspectors. There are about 1,200 inspectors that are state agents, but effectively have been deputized and work for OSHA. So, basically, you've got a little over 2,000 or so um, inspectors that are working to enforce OSHA regulations. There are over 7 million workplaces
Wow.
in the United States. So do the math. And people that have actually done the math will tell you, and again, this was out even before we had this mandate. It would take 164 years for OSHA in its current configuration to inspect all 7 million businesses one time. So it's crystal clear that there is no way in the world that OSHA could possibly enforce this mandate if masses of companies just said we're not doing it. What they're depending on is that, number one, the threat alone will be sufficient to cow people into complying. And number two, and there was actually a CBS News article about this, they plan on relying on snitches to enforce this mandate. And you know what they say about snitches, right? Snitches get stitches. But in all seriousness, they expect that, Karen, who sits in the cubicle next to you and who somehow knows that Maharrey didn't get vaccinated, she's going to call up and tattletale. And that way, the OSHA inspectors won't actually have to inspect. They'll get tipped off when companies are not complying, and then they'll be able to enforce these massive fines. And again, they're hoping that the threat of this will be enough to get businesses to comply. And sadly, I think in a lot of cases that will probably be the case.
So you think sadly that'll be the case in a lot of situations.
I don't
But
have a lot of faith in my fellow human beings.
okay. But this whole situation really mirrors what happens in so many other sectors and with so many other mandates, which is that the federal government relies on cooperation from state entities in order to
Right.
enforce it. And so there's kind of that popular phrase of, without the enforcement, all of that trumpeting from Washington are just bad ideas from evil people. But none of them really have any sway over you or me unless our neighbors, our employers, or our state and local governments are
Right.
tag teaming. But it sounds so simple when you put it that way. Well, in that case, we just won't do it. They'll say it and we won't do it, and that's the end of it. But so often that's not the end of it. How do the feds go about pressuring or incentivizing or disincentivizing state and localities into enforcing their will?
Well, they oftentimes use the carrot and stick approach of federal funding. So you'll have a lot of state governments that are afraid that if they take action against the federal government, they'll lose, certain amounts of money that are flowing into the state coffers. But the truth of the matter is, it really tends to be more of a political situation than anything else. If you have states that your state legislatures are pretty much aligned with the Biden administration, they're certainly not going to stop cooperating with federal enforcement. If you live in a red state, it's far more likely that your state legislature will take some kind of action. And we're starting to see this action percolate up. We've had a couple of bills that have been introduced. I think one in Idaho, and then also I think in Florida, where they're starting to make moves toward refusing to enforce these mandates. And I think when the state legislatures actually get rolling, which will really happen in January, I think you'll see a lot of states that will put up resistance against the mandate. So in my view, really, to stop this thing, it's totally possible because, as we've already established, the federal government can't enforce it themselves. So it really needs to be a two-pronged attack. It needs to be, one, states and localities can refuse to enforce it, refuse to inspect, refuse to take the phone calls, and just not cooperate in any way, shape, or form. And then the second really is a matter of human action. It requires people being willing to say, you know what, I'm not going to be cowed into allowing the federal government to force me to do this. That whether it's getting vaccinated or whether it's employers, just saying, well, I'm not doing this. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. State and local action and human action is really what is necessary. But this can be stopped. And we've seen the effectiveness of this with, even the air traffic control and weather issues that Southwest Airline experienced, which we all know that wasn't what that was. There are enough people who don't want to do this that can effectively create a lot of pain for the federal government. In fact, I read something the other day. I think it was in Long Island, New York. One of the hospitals there is shutting down their emergency room for the next month because they don't have enough vaccinated nurses to treat the patients. So, that human action has a lot of sway, and you put some state action or local action on top of it. I think we really could put a lot of pressure on the Biden administration to back off of this. So I'm a little bit optimistic about that, even though I'm not terribly optimistic about, my fellow humans.
So the mandate gets announced. There's a little bit of conjecture about if there is actually technically even a mandate, because people claim that they can't even actually find anything on the books. Funny how people making threats and actual laws are two separate things. But not even getting into all that. Then Court of Appeals says, the court says, no, we're going to put a hold on that because that sounds flagrantly unconstitutional, which, I mean, if a federal court is saying something unconstitutional, it must really be unconstitutional. It must be really bad. And then the appeals court said, yeah, we're going to uphold the stay for now. And all the right wing and the conservative is cheering. The courts have come to save us, Mike Maharrey. But you're saying that that's not the end of the story.
Well, I'm skeptical that the courts will ultimately save us. The circuit where the stay was introduced, and I actually read the opinion. It's actually not bad for a federal court, federal judges. They actually talked about commandeering. It made the point that where does the federal government get the power to commandeer private employers to enforce, some kind of mandate? And then they talked about the 10th Amendment issues. So it was a pretty solid opinion. But it happens to come out of the most conservative circuit in the federal judiciary. And so what they've actually done is they're going to take all of the lawsuits and they're going to stick them together into one big lawsuit. And they're literally going to have a lottery to determine which circuit hears the case. So, I mean, it could get up there. What is it? The 9th Circuit or the 12th Circuit, the one out in California, that is about as hard left as you can get. They're going to uphold a vaccine mandate. Ultimately, of course, it's going to go to the Supreme Court. And I just don't have any faith that the Supreme Court is going to side against the government. They almost always uphold government power. Now, you may get lucky. That's not a game of roulette that I really want to play. I know for a fact if the state and localities withdraw support, if we don't cooperate with it, I know for a fact that'll stop it. I'm skeptical that the politically connected lawyers at the Supreme Court are ultimately going to say, oh, no, Joe Biden, you can't do that. They might, but I doubt it. I don't think that's the best strategy. Running off to the government to stop the government, that's an iffy strategy to me. And yet that's what the conservatives, that's what they're screaming for. In fact, I wrote this article about the importance of state and local action and this idea of human action. And we actually got angry emails from Republicans saying, you need to focus on the court cases. This nullification stuff isn't going to work. And that's exactly what they said with Obamacare. we don't need to do nullification. We'll just go to sue in the courts because this is clearly unconstitutional and there's no way the courts are going to uphold it.
Well, on that note, I want to change gears really quickly because we're almost out of time. There's been some debate lately on the topic of this is sort of like a principled absolutism versus incremental sort of kind of conversation to be had of the pros and cons of state and local governments banning certain activities from private businesses. Now, in a vacuum, with us having no other conversation about what it is that's being banned, we generally, as folks like us would say, well, I don't really want to tell private actors what they can and can't do with their own money, with their own business, with their own in their own homes, whatever. On the other hand, there have been states that have moved to sign executive governors that have signed executive orders, states that have passed bills in their state legislatures to say we're not going to allow critical race theory. We're not going to allow mask mandates or vaccine mandates enforced within our state borders. We're not going to allow it. It's not even a matter of forcing it to happen. We're going to force it not to happen. Now, and I understand the two sides of the debate. One side being, well, we're not about force. You're not about coercion, and if they want to have a mandate for themselves, maybe they should be allowed to. On the other hand, I understand the argument of, but these people, they're are they even private actors if they're enforcing the regime's will? Michael Rectenwall refers to big tech companies that do the exact same thing as governmentalities. You're in bed with government. You're helping the Biden administration get what it wants by enforcing its mandates for them. And then there's state and local government saying, no, we're not going to let you do that in our state, in our town. Where do you fall on that?
I am very much a principle guy over pragmatism because we all love it when the government does something that we agree with, right? We're excited if the government, the state comes in and says, you're not going to enforce a vaccine mandate in this state. Yay, we love that because that's the policy that we like. But these same people were pulling their teeth out back during Bake the Cake. And there's no difference. So my philosophy is you want to limit government power whenever possible, at whatever level possible, because at some point, the power that you give them today to do something good is going to be turned against you. And 99% of the things that the government does are bad. They're detrimental to liberty. They're detrimental to your pocketbook. I feel like that we ultimately need to stand on principle, or else we're going to get buried by government. That's, and I know there are people that will disagree with me, and I, we can have a respectful debate. I understand where they're coming from, but I think it's very much an issue of you're cutting off your nose to spite your face when you get in bed with government trying to stop government.